You open your eyes to candlelight flickering against damp stone walls, the scent of beeswax and mildew twining together like old gossip. You're underground again, somewhere beneath a medieval monastery, maybe, or just the village chapel's crypt. It's hard to tell anymore. You hear a soft drip, drip, drip echoing nearby, as if the building itself is thinking things through. Outside, above the earth, there might be wind rustling through barley fields or gossiping around timber-framed cottages. But down here, time has folded itself into layers. The cold is a presence, not a temperature. It wraps around your ankles like a scolded cat and doesn't care for your comfort. You hold a torch. The flame dances like it knows a secret and refuses to tell you. Welcome to the world of trial by corpse. Or, as the Germans once called it, Beerright. The corpse's right to accuse its murderer from beyond the grave. Yes, in several corners of Europe, well into the late Middle Ages, people believed that dead bodies could reveal their killers. Not with spooky wails or ghostly visitations. No, much more straightforward than that. If you touched the corpse and it started bleeding again, guilty. Simple, efficient, very unhygienic. And here you are, crouched beside a very dead man, wrapped in linen, skin waxy as old cheese. The local priest mumbles a prayer while the villagers hold their breath. You're one of the suspects. And the dead man, well, he gets the final word. Now, before we get further into this lovely little tale of medieval forensic theater, a quick and gentle nudge. If you're enjoying this sleepy spiral through odd history, please consider liking the video and subscribing. It helps the channel float higher in the algorithmic sea. And if you'd be so kind, drop a comment with your location and local time. It's oddly comforting to see sleepy listeners checking in from around the world. Cheeky warning, you probably won't make it through this day. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You shuffle forward, hands trembling slightly, not from fear necessarily, but because you've just been pulled out of bed, accused of murder, and told to press your palm to a corpse's chest in front of the entire village. That would give anyone the shakes. The corpse, predictably, does nothing. Then, oh, a single line of red appears at the mouth. Gasps erupt from the crowd. You, dear listener, are in trouble. No one quite agrees when the belief in corpse accusations first started. Some say it began in pagan Europe. Others insist it was an outgrowth of early Christian superstition, where divine justice had no patience for lengthy appeals. Historians still debate whether these rituals were taken seriously or merely symbolic, a grim form of local theater. One major case occurred in 1329, in what is now Germany, where a suspect was forced to walk around the corpse of a murdered man 3 times. Upon the 3rd lap, the corpse's nose allegedly began to bleed. They considered that solid evidence. Seaside, Saxony. Weird tidbit for your pillow tonight. In parts of Bavaria, it was believed that a murderer couldn't pass through a cemetery gate without the corpse inside reacting somehow, usually via sudden blood flow, twitching, or a faint moan. The past was, let's say, imaginative. You're escorted to the edge of the chamber. The torchlight catches something, a rat darting along the crypt wall. It disappears behind a statue of Saint Sebastian, arrows and all. The villagers argue among themselves. Some think the corpse bled. Others say it was trick lighting. But in truth, the verdict's already decided. You are always going to be guilty. The corpse just gave them permission. Let's move gently to the next part of your day, the holding cell. Don't worry. It has straw, probably. The jail is generous with rats and stingy with windows. You're not given a bed, exactly. More of a hollowed patch in the hay, as if previous occupants wore the prison into the earth. You lie there listening to the soft scurrying and to the wind breathing through the gaps in the timbers like it's trying not to wake you. Your hands still smell faintly of the corpse. Clove oil, maybe? The priest had rubbed something along the linens, possibly to hide the smell of decay, possibly to give the illusion of reverence. It didn't work. Nothing about today is particularly reverent. The local magistrate will see you tomorrow. Tonight, you sleep like a suspect. Outside the jail, the world creaks along. The village isn't large, just a few dozen homes, one overworked baker, a goose that thinks it's a dog, and an inn with a stuffed fox above the hearth that makes people uncomfortable without knowing why. The cobbled streets are slick with rain. The church bell rings wrong on Tuesdays. Historically, trial by corpse, cruentation as scholars like to call it when they're trying to sound less like ghost hunters, wasn't entirely frowned upon. In fact, in some regions it was part of official legal procedure. England, for example, avoided it for the most part, preferring trial by ordeal or jury. But on the continent, oh, things got creative. You shift on your patch of straw, listening to your heartbeat echo in your ears. Somewhere out there, someone else might have touched that corpse and walked away clean. You wonder who. And here comes the ironic historical joke. Despite the macabre ritual, the actual conviction rate from cruentation was surprisingly low in some areas. In others, though, it was nearly automatic. It depended, as most things did, on whether the villagers liked you. You, unfortunately, once told the baker his bread was a bit like chewing soap. He has not forgotten. A weird fact to keep you company. In 15th century Bohemia, it was said that corpses could also cry out the name of their killer if you held your ear close enough and were pure of heart. Makes you wonder who did the ear checking, and how many people decided maybe the corpse whispered their name after all. Historians still debate whether these rituals were entirely sincere or partially performative. Tools of social control dressed up as divine intervention. Was it justice? Was it theater? Or just an elaborate excuse to justify someone's hunch? Outside, a donkey brays. Somewhere else, someone drops a ladle. The night doesn't care that you might hang tomorrow. You curl up tighter. The jailer passes by with a sputtering lantern. He peeks in at you with the same level of concern one might give a loaf of bread that's fallen on the floor. Vaguely annoyed, mildly interested, and absolutely not picking it up. He moves on. You start to drift off, head on your elbow, the scratch of hay at your cheek, and the faint taste of candle smoke in your throat. In the morning, there will be questions, and trials, and possibly more corpses. But for now, just the slow, steady tick of medieval justice, and the ghost of a goose honking somewhere in the distance. Rest well. You'll need it. Morning arrives like a poorly planned sermon, loud, cold, and 15 minutes too early. You wake to the sound of boots on stone, and a key reluctantly grinding its way through an iron lock that's been around longer than most of the village. The cell door creaks open, clearly offended at being used, and in walks a man with a beard, so thin it looks like it's been sketched on with charcoal. He's the bailiff. His job is somewhere between security guard, errand boy, and ceremonial scholar. He gestures for you to get up, though he doesn't speak. The air between you is full of medieval judgment, and possibly the smell of cabbage. You follow him through corridors of damp stone, past sconces that haven't been lit in weeks, and eventually out into the open air. It's raining. Of course it's raining. A fine, needly drizzle, the kind that soaks you not with speed, but persistence. As you pass the churchyard, you see it again, the corpse, propped up now on a wooden slab under a canopy, like some hideous guest of honor at a picnic. Its mouth has been sewn shut, but only recently. You get the distinct feeling it might not stay that way. Today is the trial. A large wooden table has been dragged into the town square. A priest stands at one end, a magistrate at the other, and several bored villagers cluster under their cloaks in the drizzle. Some are eating bread. One has brought an accordion, though no one asks him to play. And there, in the middle, is the beer. Trial by corpse isn't technically a trial, of course. It's more of a divine verification process. But today, it's wearing the robes of legitimacy. You're made to stand beside the body again. And this time, they have you recite a prayer while placing your hand on the chest. Nothing happens. Silence. Then a drip. A single dark line from the corner of the corpse's mouth, as if the heavens themselves had dramatic timing. The villagers gasp again, and someone mutters twice now. It doesn't look like blood to you. It looks more like old wine, or maybe beet syrup. But no one's asking your opinion. Historical note worth bookmarking in your brain. Trial by corpse was never fully standardized. In some areas, it was an informal custom. In others, like 16th century Saxony, it was codified into legal practice. Some records even suggest that multiple suspects could be brought forth and tested in sequence. A sort of macabre parade of hands and decaying torsos. A strange little cultural footnote. In parts of rural Switzerland, it was customary to perform this ritual with the corpse's shoes turned backwards. Supposedly, this confused the spirit and made it more honest. Whether it also made the shoes smell better is, tragically, undocumented. The magistrate clears his throat. He is rotund, pink-cheeked, and sweating through his robes, which you suspect were tailored for a man half his enthusiasm and twice his patience. He declares that, though divine signs are not to be questioned, further testimony will be heard, which is nice in theory, until you realize none of it favors you. The baker testifies first. He references the soap comment. The miller says you once refused to join the town's spring festival, calling it a bit much. The midwife insists your aura is murky. This is less a trial, and more a chance for everyone to list their grievances under the umbrella of justice. You start to get that warm, prickly feeling behind your ears, the one that says you are in the middle of something irreversible. Still, there's a part of you, small and exhausted, that can't help but marvel at the absurdity of it all. The corpse remains silent, but traumatic. You, unfortunately, do not get to be either. By midday, the magistrate declares the evidence not entirely conclusive, but also heavily suggestive, which is bureaucratic for. We're just going to say you did it and move on. You're led back to the jail, through puddles and whispers. One of the villagers tosses a crust of bread at your feet, not as a kindness, just as a gesture. The accordion player finally plays a note. It is mercifully his last. That night, sleep comes like an old dog, grumpy, insistent, and ready to lie on top of you, whether you want it or not. You curl under the tattered wool blanket provided by the jailer's wife, who gave it to you with all the grace of someone handing over a used sock. Still, it's warm. And at this point, warmth outranks dignity. In the darkness, your thoughts go feral. You wonder if the corpse really bled. You wonder if you're cursed. You wonder if you should have just lied and joined the spring festival parade like everyone else. No one ever suspects the man in a flower crown. Somewhere in the distance, the bells ring midnight. And then, impossibly, steps. Heavy, slow, scraping steps. They echo outside your cell door, uneven and dragging, like boots filled with water. You sit up. Even the rats fall silent. But it's just the priest. He opens the cell door without a word, carrying a small iron lantern and a folded scrap of parchment. His face is unreadable, though his eyebrows appear to be fighting one another. He tells you the magistrate has requested one more demonstration at sunrise. To appease certain superstitions, he says, with all the conviction of someone who also doesn't want to be awake right now. You're led not to the square, but to the edge of the forest. There, under a tarp, is the corpse again, slightly fresher this time. Not your alleged victim, but someone else. Another death. Another crime. Another suspect. Or maybe they've just decided to see what you'll do this time. You're asked to perform the ritual again, this time under torchlight. with only the priest and the magistrate present. The forest looms like a silent jury, full of things that listen but never intervene. You press your hand to the chest. This time, nothing happens, but the magistrate seems disappointed. The priest clears his throat and mutters something about temperamental spirits. You're taken back to the jail before the sun fully rises. No one speaks on the walk back. You step over a patch of night-blooming flowers that weren't there yesterday. Scholars still debate whether these last-minute rituals were meant as legal theater or genuine belief. Some argue they were simply meant to quiet restless villagers. Others suspect a darker motivation, that corpses, like people, could be made to say things with the right pressure. One weird cultural relic before you sleep again. In early Slavic lore, it was believed that a corpse could tell lies if it hadn't been buried on consecrated ground. So if the dead man had an agenda, good luck. Medieval lie detectors, it seems, had bugs. You fall asleep to the soft rustle of wind in the trees and the faint sound of dripping, though whether it's water, blood, or time itself, you aren't quite sure. You dream of candles that flicker backwards. Morning arrives again, this time with a rooster that sounds like it's giving up halfway through, as if even the local poultry has grown tired of this saga. The jailer opens your cell door with less ceremony than yesterday. He doesn't say a word, just throws in a bowl of something beige and vaguely steaming. You can't tell if it's porridge, red soup, or just mashed up old food memories. You eat it anyway. Hunger has made you less discerning. It has also made you philosophical about textures. This one is somewhere between damp oat and despair. Today's plan, as revealed by the weary priest who drifts in an hour later, involves a formal sentencing. The town council has decided to follow tradition, which here means doing what the loudest villager thinks sounds impressive. It's not exactly justice in the Roman sense, more like theater in a town with too few distractions and a little too much barley wine. You're cleaned up, slightly. They splash water on your face, comb your hair with what feels like a fork, and rewrap your wrists in cloth to make you look less like someone who's been napping on straw and more like someone who politely asked to borrow a coffin. Your shoes are still damp from yesterday's trial. Your dignity is somewhere near the goose pen, keeping company with other lost things. A broken lute string, the accordion player's self-esteem, and possibly your chances of surviving the week. The town square is fuller this time. Word has gotten around. People are here for the event, holding bread loaves like they're watching the May Day pageant. Someone set up a barrel of cider. There's a faint smell of onions and feet. One man is carving a whistle out of a stick, which he plays every time someone uses the word guilt. There's a sense that justice today is also a picnic. The magistrate takes his place again and begins to read a parchment in a voice that suggests he enjoys the sound more than the meaning. He describes the evidence, the corpses bleeding, the testimony of upstanding citizens like the baker and the accordion player, and the general vibe that you just aren't very nice. You stand, hands bound, under a gray sky that seems determined not to commit to rain or soil. And then, something unexpected. A woman steps forward. She's older, dressed in heavy wool and a kind of lace bonnet that suggests no-nonsense grandmothers and stern herbal remedies. She announces herself as the midwife, and rather dramatically, proclaims that the corpse was beginning to bloat far too soon, which, in midwife speak, means something was wrong. She suspects poison, not a knife. The crowd murmurs. Someone drops a cider cup. Someone else drops a scone, but quietly. And here's your fun historical fact. In the late Middle Ages, midwives were not just birth attendants. They were often the closest thing villages had to forensic pathologists. They inspected bodies, testified at inquests, and were believed to be able to tell if a woman had died of childbirth or witchcraft. Sometimes both. Their opinions, while unofficial, could turn the tide of trials. The magistrate looks annoyed. The priest looks relieved. And you? You stand very still, not daring to look hopeful, in case it ruins the moment. Weird tidbit for your collection. In some rural French villages, if a midwife suspected foul play, she was allowed to lick the corpse's lips to detect traces of bitter herbs or metal salts. You will never think about peppermint the same way again. Nor, frankly, should you. Historians still debate whether midwives' testimonies were more respected than feared, or just tolerated because nobody wanted to anger someone who knew exactly what you looked like during childbirth. Regardless, today, the midwife's word carries weight. The magistrate listens. He mumbles something about further investigation, and you are not released, but sent back to the jail for observation, which is medieval legal code for, we don't know what to do with you yet, and it's dinner time. Still, it's not an execution. And these days, that's called progress. You walk back past the corpse, which has now been covered in rosemary and linen. Someone finally remembered the sacred rites. You swear its expression looks slightly less accusatory. Or maybe that's just the cloth sagging. The day ends with you alone again in your cell. One rat fatter than before, and a faint hope beginning to creep in through the cracks in the stone. It doesn't wear shoes. Hope never does. Sleep finds you with less resistance tonight. You dream of bread that doesn't taste like regret, of villagers who wave with all 5 fingers, and of festivals that don't end in tribunal drama. You also dream of the magistrate dropping his scroll and muttering, "Oh no, not again." Somehow, even in dreams, bureaucracy follows you. Your cell smells different this morning. Not bad, just different. Less like damp and more like dust. The kind of scent that tells you things are shifting. When the jailer brings your morning mush, he actually meets your eyes. That's either a good sign or a very bad one. The priest arrives not long after. He's carrying a small wooden box with iron hinges and a velvet lining. He opens it carefully, revealing several small vials, a pewter spoon, and a cloth-bound ledger that's been written in what you can only describe as deep suspicion cursive. You realize you're about to witness what might be the medieval version of forensic science, or at least its shadow. He tells you, in his soft gravel voice, that the midwife has convinced the council to exhume the body of a merchant who died 2 weeks ago under similar circumstances. Similar here meaning unexpected death, wrong time of year, and eyebrows raised by someone in authority. You will accompany them, not because they trust you, but because they want to see your reaction. They've moved from trial by corpse to something arguably worse. Trial by vibes. The walk to the cemetery is slow. Not solemn, just reluctant. The villagers trail behind like people on their way to watch someone clean out a well. No one really wants to be there, but they've already said they would be. Out in the cemetery, the grass is damp and uneven. The gravediggers look mildly annoyed, like people asked to redo a job they thought was finished. One of them complains that his back hurts, and that the last time they opened a coffin, it was for nothing but worms and a pair of fancy socks. The coffin is raised, pried open, and there he is, a merchant with his mouth still stitched shut, a faint green tinge to his skin, and a look that says, "This wasn't on the invoice." The midwife approaches first, pokes at the body with a stick tipped in bronze, and sniffs. Then the priest pours a few drops of something acidic onto the tongue. No reaction. Then a flame near the nose. Nothing again. The villagers murmur. They expected drama. Instead, they got a science demonstration from 1372. You stand back, trying not to breathe too deeply. The merchant's widow steps forward and insists he had no enemies, which of course is something only someone with enemies says. She then adds that he'd recently changed his will. Ah, there it is. A new suspect is born. Your historical takeaway for this moment. The concept of forensic exhumation existed in some form as early as the 1200s. Italian legal scholars wrote about inspecting wounds post-mortem to determine cause of death. Some even propose diagrams of the human body with labeled truth zones. Whether any of this actually helped solve murders is generously a coin toss. Tonight's odd cultural morsel. In early Slavic lore, it was believed that a corpse could tell lies if it hadn't been buried on consecrated ground. So if the dead man had an agenda, good luck. Medieval lie detectors, it seems, had bugs. Literal ones too. Historians still debate whether exhumations like this were acts of true investigation or just public reassurance rituals designed to let everyone feel they'd done something. Often, the results mattered less than the performance of due diligence. It wasn't justice, it was closure, performed in linen. Back at the jail, the priest actually smiles at you, just a little. It might be wind or indigestion, or perhaps he's simply found his curiosity piqued for the first time in years. That night, your cell is warmer. Someone left you a second blanket. You don't know who, but it smells faintly of lavender and wool, and it makes you think of a childhood you may or may not have had. You fall asleep without dreaming of blood or ghosts. You dream of the goose. It finally speaks. It says, "Check the will." Then it flies off toward the forest, hulking the medieval equivalent of mic drop wisdom. Morning arrives wrapped in fog and the unsettling silence of people who've run out of rumors for now. When you're roused, it's not by the jailer, but by the midwife herself, standing in the doorway of your cell like a stone gargoyle come to life. She's holding a bundle of herbs in one hand and a folded parchment in the other, and she looks like she hasn't slept since the 14th century began. "Get up," she says, in a tone that doesn't allow room for hesitation. You get up. She informs you that the widow has made a formal accusation, not against you, but against her late husband's apprentice, a young man with hair like a thatched roof and the work ethic of a damp sponge. Apparently, he stood to gain something from the death, though no one can remember exactly what. Possibly a shop, possibly a mule, possibly just the pleasure of not carrying sacks anymore. In any case, the town council now has a new favorite theory. You're not released, but you are now considered non-primary, which is a fancy medieval way of saying, we'll keep you around in case this next theory doesn't pan out. Congratulations. You are officially Plan B. Today's fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, suspects could be held indefinitely without formal charges, especially if the community was uncertain, but still suspicious. They were often referred to as held for conscience, which sounds noble, but usually meant a slow spiral into neglect, suspicion, and very bland food. You're offered better food today. It arrives on a wooden tray that is only slightly cracked and includes a boiled egg, a hunk of hard cheese, and a single grape, which feels more like a statement than a serving. Still, it's better than the beige blob from before. You eat it all, slowly, as though it might vanish if you blink. You're allowed into the courtyard for fresh air. It smells of chickens, distant smoke, and the mossy weight of stone walls that have seen too many winters and not enough competent decisions. You sit on a damp bench, the kind that's always colder than it should be, and watch a goat attempt to eat a rope. It's a slow morning, a surprisingly philosophical one, if you're inclined. The midwife joins you on the bench, murmuring that the widow has been overly cooperative. That's never good. According to local logic, anyone too eager to talk probably has something they shouldn't be saying. Suddenly, the bell rings. Not the usual church bell, the smaller, brassier one used only for civic announcements and dramatic overreactions. The apprentice has fled. Apparently, when told he was under suspicion, he promptly dropped the basket of pears and sprinted into the forest without saying a word. His speed was described as unseemly, which, in this context, means he ran faster than someone properly guilty should. You're not the only one who finds this suspicious. Within hours, a search party is loosely assembled. A handful of men with sticks, a torch or two, and one volunteer who brought his hunting dog, even though it's blind. The villagers are less interested in finding the apprentice than they are in having something to talk about. You remain in your cell, but the atmosphere has shifted. You're not the center of the drama anymore. You're the footnote. You've been downgraded from villain to village curiosity. Back in your cell that evening, the priest visits again. He carries a small roll of parchment and a candle. He tells you the council wants you to stay for now, just in case they need your testimony. His expression softens when he adds, almost offhandedly, "You're safer here than out there right now." You believe him. Tonight's obscure cultural tidbit. In parts of old Prussia, it was believed that if a suspect fled an accusation, the town could legally curse their shadow. This meant they would refuse to acknowledge their name, their debts, or their existence. It was the social equivalent of being erased with a damp sponge, a surprisingly efficient form of medieval ghosting. Historians still debate whether these shadow curses were rooted in pagan ritual, Christian shunning practices, or simply boredom during long winters. Some think they were serious spiritual acts. Others think they were just a convenient excuse to ignore that one guy who always asked for bread and never brought anything to the potluck. You fall asleep to the sound of wind nudging the shutters, a goat somewhere braying indignantly, and a vague comfort in being the one not currently missing in the woods. Tonight, you dream that the corpse gets up, not to accuse you, but to join the queue at the bakery. It orders a scone. The baker doesn't even blink. The next morning, the village is abuzz. Not in the energetic, good harvest way, but in the anxious, someone important is coming way. You hear it in the cadence of footsteps outside your cell, the way doors open a little slower, and how even the rooster tries to crow with a bit more professionalism, as if it's been coached. You're told that an official is arriving from the nearby city, a circuit justice. The title alone causes the priest to clean under his nails, and the magistrate to visibly sweat into his collar. Apparently, the court in the city has heard of the recent corpse drama, and has sent someone to look into the matter. Unofficially, of course. Officially, it's a friendly visit, but everyone acts like it's a surprise inspection of a very dirty kitchen. The man arrives at midday, on a chestnut mare that looks more competent than any of the humans present. He's tall, not particularly old, and wears a black doublet that has seen exactly 0 farm work. His boots are clean, suspiciously clean. He walks like someone who once read a book about mud and decided that was close enough. He interviews everyone: the priest, the midwife, the widow, the baker, who tries once again to bring up the soap bread incident. The justice does not write it down. He doesn't even blink. It's the first time the baker has been ignored in public, and he looks shaken. Eventually, the justice comes to you. You sit across from him on a bench outside your cell. His eyes are sharp, and his hands are clean, but his voice is calm, measured. He doesn't ask if you did it. He asks how you slept each night. You blink. He's testing you, not for guilt, but for guilt's byproduct, fear, and perhaps something else. He asks about the second corpse, the apprentice, and the midwife's theories. You answer honestly, with a kind of cautious calm that only comes from having no more energy to lie. He nods just once. Then, quite suddenly, he smiles. "You're not the kind who'd bleed a corpse," he says, and it sounds like the highest compliment you've been given in weeks. He closes his ledger and stands. "I'm recommending your release," he says, "pending final witness confirmation," which, in the local legal language, means you're probably fine now, unless the apprentice reappears wearing your shirt and carrying a bloody stick. Today's scholarly fact: circuit justices were real traveling legal authorities in medieval and early modern Europe, especially in England. They moved from town to town, conducting trials and reviews. Some were corrupt. Others were revered. Many were simply tired. But in towns without proper judges, they were the closest thing to real justice people could hope for. An itinerant rogue with a quill and questionable sleep habits. Weird little cultural footnote. In certain towns in northern Italy, it was once believed that if a judge made an unjust ruling, a church bell would spontaneously crack. It didn't stop bad rulings, but it gave everyone something traumatic to blame. Some bells, it said, cracked multiple times in one year. Historians still debate whether traveling judges improved rural justice or simply added a layer of performative bureaucracy. In many cases, the locals kept doing what they'd always done and let the justices think they've made a difference. That evening, you're told you will not be executed. This is delivered in the same tone one might use to announce that a favorite cheese has been restocked at the market. There's no joy in it, just administrative relief. You are also told you cannot leave. Yet, just until we sort out the apprentice, they say. Back in your cell, the goat has finally won its battle with the rope and is now chewing through a nearby barrel. The jailer is asleep with a cider mug on his chest. The accordion, mercifully, is missing, possibly cursed, hopefully destroyed. You lie back, wrap the lavender-scented blanket around you, and breathe. It's still not home, but it doesn't feel like a tomb anymore. Tonight, you dream of clean boots and cracked bells, and someone just outside the frame, smiling faintly, holding a scone. It's the corpse again, but this time, it offers you a bite. You wake before the rooster today, not because you're anxious, but because the goat has figured out how to open your cell door. You stare at it for a long moment as it chews a corner of your blanket with slow, meditative purpose. There's a part of you that's impressed. Another part that's wondering how much worse things could possibly get if you just followed the goat out into the woods and never looked back. But you don't. You stay. Because you've learned something. In this village, disappearing is treated as a confession, and you've grown rather fond of not being burned, hanged, or otherwise judged by candlelight. The jailer shoos the goat out and hands you a cup of something warm. Not soup, not tea, possibly water that's been near herbs. You sip it anyway. By mid-morning, the town square is swarming with purpose. Not the kind that leads to productivity, just the kind that looks impressive from a distance. The magistrate has assembled a small tribunal, not to judge you, thank goodness, but to address the apprentice's disappearance. Apparently, someone found his hat at the edge of the forest, and in keeping with local logic, the hat's location is being treated as an official deposition. You are summoned to appear, not as a suspect, but as a known observer. You're not sure what that means, but it comes with a stool and the option to sit, so you accept. As you watch the proceedings unfold, you realize that justice in this village is less about truth and more about narrative. Who seems guilty? Who looks tired? Who brought snacks to the hearing? The widow testifies again, this time weeping into a surprisingly embroidered handkerchief. The midwife rolls her eyes so hard you hear it. Then comes the village hunter. He claims he found footprints, one set human, one set, well, not. Too large, too deep. The kind of prints that make people want to bring salt and candles. The village has seen strange things before, he says. It's why the woods are considered off-limits after sunset. Suddenly, the narrative veers sideways. From mundane murder to whispered legend. Today's historical gem. In many medieval villages, unexplained crimes were often attributed to supernatural forces, forest spirits, revenants, or cursed saints. Not necessarily because people believed it, but because it let them stop arguing. Superstition was an acceptable form of community consensus. Obscure but real belief. In 14th century Carpathia, it was rumored that certain trees could record the crimes committed near them. Locals would gather at dawn to listen to the bark. What they heard was never written down, probably because it sounded like wind or guilt. Historians still debate whether communities truly believed in these magical explanations or simply found them more comforting than the chaos of human malice. The hearing ends inconclusively. The apprentice is still missing. The hunter wants to search the woods. The magistrate wants to avoid responsibility. The justice, still miraculously clean, scribbles something in his ledger and mutters that the situation is evolving. You are excused. That evening, as the fog rolls back in and the torches are lit early, you stand just outside your cell and look toward the tree line. It feels like the forest is breathing. And for a moment, you imagine the apprentice crouched between roots, watching the village through a veil of leaves. Or something watching him. You sleep indoors, gratefully. Your dreams are quiet, but they smell like pine. At breakfast, the jailer forgets your name and refers to you as that corpse fellow. You decide not to correct him. You have, after all, touched more dead bodies this week than most people manage in a lifetime. The justice returns to question you again. This time, he brings bread, the good kind, dense, with flecks of poppy in a crust that actually fights back when you bite it. He doesn't offer an apology, just a nod. Apparently, in legal circles, carbohydrates are contrition. He wants to know more about your impressions of the widow. Not facts, feelings. Did she seem rehearsed? Did she avoid your eyes? Did she seem like someone who keeps poison under her bed, or dried lavender? You answer cautiously. She seemed aware, like someone who had expected a death and hadn't had time to decide whether to mourn it or file paperwork. He scribbles that down. Today's judicial tidbit. Widows in medieval Europe were often viewed with deep suspicion, particularly if they had access to inheritance or lived independently. In some areas, being a widow was enough to make you eligible for witchcraft accusations. Too sad? Suspicious? Not sad enough? Equally suspicious. Weird cultural curveball. In parts of Wales, there was a belief that if a widow wore bright colors too soon after a husband's death, his ghost would be insulted and haunt the laundry. Historians still debate whether these biases stemmed from real social threats or just discomfort with powerful women who suddenly had land and no oversight. By late afternoon, the justice convenes a final private meeting. He gathers the magistrate, the midwife, and surprisingly, you. It's not an official trial. It's more like damage control with snacks. The midwife presents her findings. Trace amounts of crushed foxglove in the merchant's stomach. A bitter poison, easy to mix with wine. Not fatal in small amounts, lethal in larger ones. And most interestingly, rare. Only found in the monastery garden, which is supposed to be locked. The justice raises an eyebrow. The priest goes pale. The magistrate goes very still. Then the widow is summoned. She enters like a queen, calm, poised, dressed too well for someone living in the shadow of death. She denies everything, of course. But when the justice asks about her keys, her fingers twitch. The midwife notices. A long silence follows. You are sent back to your cell, not because you're guilty, but because you're now part of the story, and no one is quite ready for the ending yet. That night, you are given stew, real stew, with carrots, and something that might be mutton. The goat has moved on to menacing a different barrel. The moon is full. You lie back, watching the light from your candle dance across the ceiling. The village is quiet, too quiet, and for once, you're not the reason why. You wake to an odd sound. Boots, not the hesitant, dragging shuffle of a tired jailer or the priest's careful step, but crisp, fast footsteps. Multiple pairs, purposeful. It's still early. The rooster hasn't even remembered it has a job. You sit up. Outside your cell, the justice is speaking in a low voice to someone you don't recognize. A messenger, maybe. He's mud-splattered and out of breath, clutching a small satchel like it holds the last secret in Christendom. They speak too quietly for you to hear, but the look on the justice's face is enough. Surprise. Calculation. Then, something harder to name, like disappointment wrapped in inevitability. By breakfast, the village knows. The apprentice has been found. Or, more accurately, parts of him have. A boot, a length of tunic, a fragment of belt, discovered at the river's edge where the current runs fast and cold and full of secrets. There are no wounds, no blood, just the impression that something dragged him in and didn't see the need to return him in one piece. The midwife is the one who names it. Witch fox water, she says grimly. It keeps what it takes. The villagers murmur, as if she's confirmed something they already suspected. Someone brings out garlic. Someone else spits into the fire. The justice doesn't entertain superstition, at least not openly. But he doesn't dismiss it either. You're summoned again, not accused, not blamed, just questioned. Gently, you tell them everything you remember. The night the apprentice fled, the broken rope gate at the edge of the woods, the way the air had gone still, how even the goat didn't wander far that evening. Historical note worth chewing on. River drownings were often ruled natural deaths in medieval courts, even when suspicion lingered. But when it came to apprentices and young men, vanishing meant two things, guilt or punishment. It never meant unlucky. Strange cultural tidbit of the day. In 13th century Brittany, if a young man drowned and no one claimed responsibility, the village would place his remaining clothes at the highest tree near the riverbank. This was not memorial. It was bait. If the spirit returned for them, he was innocent. If they remained untouched, well, not so much. Historians still debate whether the practice was sincere or just poetic guilt management. Back in the village square, the widow is being questioned again. Not formally, there's no gallows talk, no trial, but the crowd has shifted their gaze. Less curious now, more hawk-like. You watch from your bench as the justice speaks to her in low tones, parchment in hand, a wax seal ready. By evening, you are summoned one final time. The justice tells you the case is closed, not because every question has an answer, but because every thread has frayed. The apprentice is dead. The widow is gone, left quietly that afternoon with 2 mules and an unseasonal amount of luggage. No one stopped her. Your name is clear, officially. He offers you a letter of travel, a protection writ. It bears his seal and a note that you've been cooperative, patient, and repeatedly unlucky, which, in medieval legal terms, is practically sainthood. That night, the priest invites you to sleep in the rectory. Your cell is empty, cleaned, reset. The goat does not follow. You sleep in a bed for the first time in weeks. The linen smells of beeswax and thyme. The pillow is stuffed with feathers that crunch softly when you shift. And you dream of nothing at all. Morning brings light through glass, actual glass. Wavy, flawed, beautiful in its own way. The window is narrow, shaped like a keyhole, and filled with the kind of stained color that makes everything look like a painting you were never meant to step into. You lie in bed longer than usual, letting the silence fill your ears. No bells, no boots, no whispering just outside the cell door. Just the sound of birds, and yes, the goat again, somewhere beyond the chapel wall, chewing something wooden with delight. The priest brings you tea, real tea, made with rosemary and a pinch of something sweet. He sits beside you in the high-backed chair that creaks even when empty. You talk lightly like neighbors. He tells you the village has returned to its rhythm. Bread is being baked again. The accordion player has resumed his one-note performances, though now from a distance. You ask about the widow. He sighs, says she left a note, unsigned, tucked under a candle stub. She said she didn't poison him, he murmurs. But she also said she was relieved to be leaving. Neither statement is entirely comforting. Historical fact cradle like a warm teacup. By the 15th century, the idea of legal closure often relied more on community satisfaction than evidence. If the village believed justice had been served, or at least sufficiently dramatized, then the matter could be considered resolved. The truth was often irrelevant if the ending felt complete. Today's strange cultural relic. In some parts of the Rhineland, it was believed that unsolved deaths created a kind of spiritual debt that passed through generations. Families would hang small iron tokens above doorways to signify the unpaid burden. Over time, these tokens were collected, polished, inherited, and never spoken of directly. Historians still debate whether this was superstition, trauma management, or an early form of passive-aggressive decor. You are told you may leave at your leisure. The justice is gone. The magistrate is back to arguing with the baker over flour measurements. Life continues. It always does. You pack your few things. The priest gives you a small satchel of food, cheese, bread, a little salted plum, and something wrapped in cloth. You open it later, on the road. It's the lavender-scented blanket from your cell. He has sewn a small cross into the corner, just in case. As you walk out of the village for the first time in weeks, the trees seem less menacing, the road less accusatory. The forest edge no longer watches you with suspicion, just the wind threading between its branches, quiet and disinterested. And then, from the distance, a sound. Hooves. You turn. It's the goat, following at a dignified distance, as if you're now the one on trial. You sigh, but you don't stop it. Together, you walk on. The road away from the village is rutted, muddy, and comfortingly dull. The kind of path that asks nothing from you but your patience, and maybe your left boot. It sticks once, threatens to stay behind, and gives up and slurps after you like an embarrassed child. The goat trots beside you, its hooves making soft, satisfied sounds like someone gently drumming their fingers on a table while pretending not to be watching you. You've stopped questioning its presence. It doesn't seem to belong to anyone. It doesn't ask for anything. It simply goes where you go, like a persistent moral lesson in wool form. It's unclear whether the goat is now yours, or simply refuses to let you travel home. Either way, it follows with the solemnity of an unpaid bodyguard. You name it, justice. Not as an insult, but because it insists on being present and never explains its decisions. A countryside unfolds slowly. Rolling fields, squat trees bent by years of unhelpful weather, and the occasional crow cawing at absolutely nothing. Every so often, you pass a milestone carved with distances to places you've never been. One claims it's 4 leagues to Stonemark. Another, older and cracked, simply says, "Beware." Someone has etched a smiley face beneath it. You appreciate the effort. Around midday, the rain begins. Not a storm, just the kind of drizzle that sneaks into your sleeves and refuses to leave. You find shelter beneath an old yew tree, whose branches curve low like it's trying to whisper something. You sit in the crook of its roots. The goat joins you, sighing deeply like it's been through worse. You share a bit of cheese. The goat chews slowly, eyes narrowed, as if judging both the dairy and the moment. As you rest, your mind drifts, not to the jail, not to the widow, not to the apprentice swallowed by silence. You find yourself returning to the ritual, the trial by corpse, that sacred little theater that decided your life on the basis of a nosebleed and some village gossip. You think about how everyone watched the body so closely, about how they were hoping it would bleed, not out of cruelty, but out of desperation. People wanted the dead to speak, not because they distrusted the living, but because they knew the living, and didn't trust themselves. Your historical curiosity, now free from shackles and soup bowls, blossoms. In some regions, you recall, the corpse was carried from house to house, an unwilling pilgrim, so that every suspect might lay a hand on it. There were chants, incense, silence, sometimes even music. It became a community event, half vigil, half witch hunt. You wonder who first decided that blood was truth. Today's historical insight, the ritual of cruentation, where a murdered corpse was believed to bleed in the presence of its killer, was codified into law in various places from the 12th to 17th centuries. Not merely folklore. It was admissible in court, considered valid testimony from beyond the grave. Records from the Holy Roman Empire include entire legal debates over how long a corpse remained spiritually communicative. And here's the odd cultural flourish. In parts of Bohemia, a silver coin was placed under the corpse's tongue to pay for truth. If the coin turned black by morning, guilt was confirmed. If it vanished entirely, the body was declared innocent. What happened to the coin was never questioned. If it was missing, it was divine intervention. If it was found in a child's pocket later, well, that child was in very big trouble. Historians still debate whether these rituals were based on ancient pagan rites or invented whole cloth by desperate villages. Maybe both, maybe neither. Maybe truth was always meant to bleed a little before it was believed. You finish the bread and lie back in the grass, staring up at the pale sky as clouds drift by like indecisive jurors. The goat curls up nearby, snores once, and falls asleep. You follow. And your dream, this time, is of stone altars, flickering torches, and the whisper of parchment being sealed with wax, but no blood. Not this time. You reach the next village by late afternoon. The air smells like damp wool and turned earth. A wooden sign creaks in the breeze, swinging on one nail. Thistlebridge. Someone painted flowers around the letters. Most of the petals have chipped away, like optimism in bad weather. The village is sleepy, smaller than your last, with only one street and two shops. A baker and a woman who sells everything else, including unsolicited advice. A cat sleeps on a basket of spoons outside her door. It does not move when you pass. You stop by the well. It's cool here, shaded by a leaning oak. A few children watch you from behind a fence. One points at the goat. Another asks if it's your lawyer. You nod solemnly. They accept this without question. Children, after all, understand that logic is a poor defense against magic. At the inn, the innkeeper squints at you, then at the travel letter bearing the seal of the circuit justice. You're given a room, a bowl of stew, and a cot that doesn't so much creak as it politely weeps when you sit on it. The goat is tethered to a nearby fence with a length of fraying rope. It doesn't protest. It seems to be taking its retirement seriously. But before you sleep, you're invited, gently, hesitantly, to a local wake. A merchant's daughter passed in her sleep. No suspicion, no trial, just grief and bread and beer. You go because it feels right. The house is small, timber-framed, and smells of rose oil and rye. The air inside is thick with rosemary and beeswax. Someone's placed polished stones along the windowsills to hold the spirit inside. You nod at the gesture. It's an old one, older than this village. People speak in low tones. You nod to the family. You light a candle. You sit quietly in a corner with a mug and your thoughts. And there it is, the body, laid out under linen, peaceful, hands folded, hair braided with blue thread. She looks like she's simply resting before a long journey. No blood, no ritual, no villagers whispering about accusations or signs. Just farewell. And yet, someone whispers something about the old ways. She shouldn't be left unattended, someone else mutters. Not with the moon like that. You hear murmurs of cruentation, of stories from a nearby village. Of blood that returned, you do not speak. But your silence says everything. Tonight's obscure detail. In parts of Transylvania, a mirror was placed beside the corpse. Not to reflect the face, but to reflect guilt. If it cracked before morning, they said, someone in the room was guilty of harboring secrets. It was also said that mirrors, once used this way, should never be looked into again. They remembered too much. Scholars still debate whether this was genuine ritual community pressure, or just grief with choreography. You stay until the last candle burns low. Then you return to the inn. The goat is still asleep beside the fence, but someone has left it a crust of bread. You lie down fully clothed, the lavender-scented blanket still folded in your satchel, unused but comforting. You do not dream tonight. Not of blood, not of trials, not of the girl, still and silent, lying beneath the pale linen. You wake once, just before dawn, to the sound of wind through the shutters, and you realize something. The story is still following you, but now it walks a few paces behind. The morning after the wake is silver and soft, like someone pressed the whole world through gauze. The light through your window is the kind that doesn't insist on anything. It just exists, patiently, waiting for you to notice it. You sit on the edge of your cot, still wrapped in the lavender-scented blanket, holding a crust of bread from the inn's breakfast tray. The goat chews methodically at a length of rope it's supposed to be tied to. It has made excellent progress. You could stay in Thistlebridge. No one here knows what happened in the last village. No one asks why the circuit justice gave you a letter sealed with wax. You are just another traveler passing through with tired boots and strange company. The baker gives you a respectful nod now. You suspect the goat has something to do with it, but something stirs in you, a kind of narrative itch, a sense that the story isn't over. Not just the widow and the apprentice and the corpse that bled, but the whole strange tradition of letting the dead settle scores. You've seen how people believe in it, how they want to believe in it, not because it makes sense, but because it offers something dangerously close to closure. You pack your few belongings. The innkeeper hands you a piece of cheese for the road and pats the goat like it's some kind of village mascot. The advice seller nods from across the street. She mouths something. You think it's don't ask the mirrors. You leave before the bells. The road ahead is longer now. Less about destination, more about direction. You pass through hamlets, meadows, and the occasional crumbling shrine to saints who never made the canon. People greet you. They talk. You listen. And every few days, someone mentions a case, a strange death, a vanished cousin, a blood-stained floor that won't clean. And they ask you. You don't know when you became an expert, but you do know what bleeding means, and what it doesn't. Today's final historical truth. The last known official case of cruentation on record occurred in the 17th century in Saxony. A man was convicted after a corpse bled at the touch. Years later, the real killer confessed. The case was quietly stricken from the record, but the legend never left. And a final strange tidbit. In parts of the Black Forest, villagers whispered that if a corpse bled falsely, if it accused the wrong person, its own bones would twist in the grave. To lie in death, they believed, was to curse your soul to endless motion beneath the earth. Historians still debate whether these were warnings or confessions. By evening, you arrive in another village. Smaller, quieter. The people are kind, but there's something wary behind their smiles. You sleep in the barn behind the tavern. The goat claims a pile of hay and snores audibly. You lie awake a little longer, listening to the silence, thinking of blood and coins and stories that never stop bleeding, even after the mouth has been stitched closed. And then, finally, you close your eyes. The road hums with stillness now. No footsteps, no whispers, just the soft exhale of wind across low fields, brushing through barley and broomgrass like fingers along an old harp. You've walked far. Your boots are quieter than they used to be. The leather softened, the soles smoothed by story. The goat sleeps curled beside you like punctuation, definitive, unbothered. Above, stars gather slowly, not in clusters, but in quiet procession. A slow constellation of memory, each one blinking like a candle someone forgot to blow out. You see the shape of the village chapel in them, the bier, the stitched mouth. a candle that never quite stayed lit. And behind that, stone steps, forest roots, mirrors that never cracked. The moon does not ask questions tonight. The earth feels warm beneath you, finally. You stretch out, one hand resting on your satchel, the other on the blanket. Lavender, faded now, but still carrying the ghost of safety. Somewhere, someone is telling a story about the man who once touched a corpse and lived. About the traveler who walked with a goat and silence. They might call you a sage, or a witch, or a fool with nowhere better to be. That's fine. Stories soften when spoken in candlelight. And here you are now, drifting, not in fear, not in judgment, but in stillness. The world quiets around you, like a hand smoothing down rumpled sheets. The air is soft, the breeze low, and the final breath you take is slow, drawn from someplace deeper than lungs. You are not on trial anymore. You are just here. Rest now, the dead are at peace, and for once, so are you. The first thing you notice is the moss, soft, velvety, and so green it almost hurts. It carpets the forest floor like nature's apology for everything else being so loud. Above, the trees are ancient and disinterested, their branches forming loose, sun-dappled canopies that whisper to each other in a language made of breeze and birdsong. You're barefoot, or at least it feels that way. The ground is springy, cool. Every step releases a faint, earthy perfume. Pine needles, wet bark, fungal ambition. Somewhere ahead, something rings softly, like laughter or bells, or that particular feeling you get when you remember a dream you didn't mean to forget. You can't see it yet, but you're walking toward it. Because of course you are. Welcome to the edge of a fairy ring. Not the shiny cartoon version with sparkles and a moral lesson, no. This is the older kind, the darker kind. The kind that hums faintly when the air is still and changes the taste of your water. Before we slip too far into mossy mystery, a gentle nudge. If you enjoy these quiet little detours into strange, sleep-adjacent history, feel free to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It helps us keep the candles lit. And if you'd like to leave a comment with your location and local time, I'd love to know where in the world you're listening from. Whether you're tucked into bed or lost somewhere beneath the duvet. Now, cheeky warning. You probably won't make it through this day. Now let's ease into tonight's journey. You are a villager in the 14th century. You live at the edge of a meadow that's just a little too circular. It looks wrong at a distance and wrong up close. The grass grows thick and lush inside the circle. Outside, it's scraggly and unsure. No one plants there. No one grazes livestock there. The children know better than to run across it, though no one's exactly told them why. Your house, wattle and daub, thatched and drafty, leans slightly away from the ring. The roof leaks in exactly 2 places. The kitchen smells like smoke and pickled turnips. Your bed is stuffed with straw and opinions. But it's yours. This morning, you're hauling a bucket of water back from the well when you see it again. A new mushroom, pale, round, smug. It's completed the circle. The ring is full now. Historically, fairy rings, naturally occurring rings of mushrooms, were seen across Europe as marks of the otherworld. In Celtic folklore, they were believed to be portals to the realm of the Sidhe, the fairy folk. Not the winged, giggling variety, but something older, stranger, and deeply uninterested in your personal comfort. You drop the bucket. Just a little, not because you're afraid, but because, somewhere deep in your bones, you remember last summer when the tailor's apprentice danced too close to the ring and came back different, polite, quiet, eyes too wide. Obscure cultural tidbit. In parts of medieval Germany, it was believed that standing inside a fairy ring at twilight would cause your hair to turn white before sunrise. The solution? Wear your boots inside out and carry a piece of raw bread in your pocket. It's unclear whether this actually helped, but it did make for some interesting fashion statements. Historians still debate whether fairy rings were mostly feared or revered, whether they were seen as warnings, blessings, or just weirdly circular plant problems. What's clear is that people didn't mess with them, not twice. The bucket now sits at your feet, forgotten. You stare at the ring. It hums faintly. The trees lean away from it. Behind you, someone shuts a window. You don't look back, because something in the circle has started to glow. The glow is faint, just enough to turn the morning fog into something theatrical. Not warm, not cold, just wrong. Like candlelight underwater, or the light from a fire you never lit. It moves slightly, not flickering, not pulsing, just shifting the way your stomach does when you realize you've forgotten something important and possibly edible. You blink, and the glow is gone. Or it's inside your eyes now. Hard to say. You pick up the bucket again, but the water sloshed out during your distraction. Typical. The well is a 10-minute walk, unless you're running from bees, in which case it's 5. Today, though, you linger, because something about that circle has changed. Not in the visible way. There are still mushrooms, still that unnatural velvet of grass, but in the sense of a door being opened somewhere behind you, quietly, slowly, and not for your benefit. You aren't the only one who noticed. Old Matilda is watching from her doorway, wrapped in a shawl that smells like sage and judgment. She doesn't wave, just stares at the ring, then back at you, and slowly, very deliberately, spits into the dust, which in local custom means, no thank you, or possibly, I told you so, or occasionally, the cheese has gone off. It's a versatile gesture. You nod back, respectfully. It's not wise to ignore Matilda, even if she has a reputation for talking to her hens like they're in a town council meeting. You walk back to the cottage with your empty bucket, but not before noticing the fox. It sits just outside the ring, unnaturally still, ears forward, tail curled like punctuation, watching. Its eyes don't blink. They shine like wet stones. And when you glance away for a second to avoid being rude, because foxes, after all, are noble creatures, it vanishes. No rustle, no scamper, just gone. Your cottage welcomes you with the smell of ash and last night's onions. The hearth hasn't been swept. The windows are fogged from the inside. Your boots leave small, wet smudges across the packed dirt floor. You place the bucket next to the door, where it will sit, dry and slightly resentful, until someone gives it a second chance. You sit down and try to eat, but the bread is hard enough to count as a weapon, and your appetite has been left somewhere near the glowing part of the morning. You chew one corner just for formality, then set it back down like a guest you regret inviting. You stare out the window. The ring is still visible from here, framed perfectly by your warped glass pane. It's too round. Nature doesn't make perfect circles. Not on purpose. The mushrooms are a little taller now. Maybe. You're not sure. Maybe they're just bolder. Major historical fact to chew on. In medieval Britain, fairy rings were associated with time displacement. It was believed that stepping into one might transport you into the realm of the Fae, where time passed differently. A moment inside could equal days, months, or even years in the real world. There are entire folk tales built on a man returning to his village after an afternoon in the ring, only to find it abandoned, overgrown, or full of strangers who all share his last name. You remember that tale from winter, the one the blacksmith told after his third cup of mead, about the girl who went picking mushrooms at dusk and came back at dawn without her voice. He said she kept trying to write with her hands, but they moved too fast for anyone to understand. She never spoke again, but she danced all the time, even in her sleep. People stopped telling that story after a while. It made the children anxious. obscure detail to carry with you. In parts of rural France, it was believed that to speak the name of someone inside a fairy ring was to trap them there forever. The only solution was to walk widdershins around the circle 3 times while reciting a hymn backward. This, naturally, led to more confusion than rescue, especially when no one could agree which hymn. Historians still debate whether these practices were remnants of older pre-Christian rituals or just extremely elaborate excuses for why you never came back from mushroom collecting on time. Either way, the rules always seem to outnumber the reasons. You leave your uneaten bread on the table. You open the door again. The fox is gone, but the ring is still full. You don't step outside. Not yet. Instead, you reach for your cloak. Not the one you wear to market, but the other one. The one that smells faintly of dried mint and iron. Because if you're going near that circle again, even just to stand at the edge, you know better than to go bareheaded and breadless. You tuck a small slice of raw dough into your pocket. Not superstition, just habit. The ring waits. The light has changed again. You stand in your doorway for a long time, cloak wrapped around you like it might offer answers. The ring hasn't moved, not visibly, but something in the air feels sideways. The kind of weather that makes birds change direction and grandmothers light candles for no declared reason. The light has the quality of wet parchment. Colors seem slightly off, like you're viewing the world through a jug of well water. You step outside. Your boots crunch gently on the gravel. The air is damp, but not cold. You can hear bees somewhere, muffled and half-hearted, like they've gotten into the meat again. There's a faint sound from the woods. Not birdsong, not wind. Just sound, like a breath being held, or a door opening in a room you didn't know existed. You walk toward the ring, not because you're brave, exactly, but because avoidance is a limited strategy, and curiosity has sharper elbows. The grass outside the circle is normal, patchy, stiff, the color of boiled cabbage. Inside, though, it's unnaturally soft, and thick, and springy, like walking on a mattress made of secrets. You don't step into it. Of course not. You're not that curious, yet. You circle the ring once, and twice, then a third time, slow and wide. You whisper a rhyme you only half remember, the one about iron nails and turning your socks inside out, the one your mother said never worked, but made her feel better. You hold a piece of raw bread dough in your pocket, like it's a talisman. Maybe it is. There's no breeze, no shift in light, but you feel watched. You bend down to inspect one of the mushrooms. It's the usual kind, pale, slightly damp, a little smug, but something about it seems off. Not in shape or color, but in confidence. It's sure of itself. You wouldn't be surprised if it had a name. Major historical fact for your mental satchel. Some of the earliest written references to fairy rings come from the 12th century, though the belief likely predates it by centuries. In parts of Wales and Scotland, these rings were considered the remnants of fairy dances, places where the earth had been touched thin by revels that humans were not meant to witness. The idea persisted well into the 19th century, even as scientific explanations emerged. There's a story you remember, half told around a fire. A shepherd followed a lamb into a ring and vanished, came back with silver coins in his mouth and no memory of what day it was. The coins turned to leaves by nightfall. He never spoke again, but he smiled a lot, unsettlingly. Obscure cultural tidbit. In some regions of Ireland, it was believed that placing a silver coin in the center of a fairy ring would allow you to speak to someone lost within, but only once, and only for the length of a single breath. No pressure. Imagine trying to explain yourself in a sigh. Historians still debate whether these interactions were sincere beliefs or symbolic acts of grief and longing. One scholar suggested that fairy ring traditions served as a communal way to express missing persons cases without assuming the worst. Another theorized it was simply a very poetic way to avoid explaining quicksand. You don't place anything in the center. Not today. Instead, you take a small step back. A shadow moves across the ring. Not yours. Not the fox's. Something taller, thinner, like wind learning how to stand upright. You blink. It's gone. And then, footsteps. You freeze. The crunch of gravel. Closer. Matilda. You turn. Nothing, but the back of your neck prickles. You walk home more quickly than you mean to. You try not to look like you're hurrying, the way people do when they hear music in a place where there shouldn't be any. Back in the cottage, the fire has gone out. You didn't light it this morning, but it's colder than it should be. The uneaten bread is gone. In its place is a mushroom, a different one, red with white speckles. Absolutely not local. It sits on your table with quiet confidence, like it knows exactly where it is. You stare at it. It doesn't blink, but you feel like it could. You sit at your kitchen table, staring at the mushroom like it might start singing, or blinking, or levitating. You'd accept any of those at this point. It just sits there, innocent, menacing, moist. You poke it. It's real. Squishy, fresh, definitely not from your side of the forest. You check your windows, all closed. You check the door, latched. You check the goat. Wait, no goat. It doesn't live here. You don't own a goat. Why did you check for a goat? You sit down again, slower this time. The mushroom is still on the table, unmoving. You try not to imagine what it would taste like in a stew, or a dream. You take a cloth from the shelf, wrap the mushroom carefully, and place it in your cupboard. Not because you want it, but because you don't want to throw it out. Not directly. That feels rude. Like turning down a gift from something that never learned how to take rejection gracefully. You check your pockets. The bread dough is still there, slightly warm from your hand. You rewrap it and set it by the hearth like a reluctant offering. Just in case. Major historical fact of the hour. Amanita muscaria, the iconic red mushroom with white spots, is psychoactive, toxic in large quantities, and heavily featured in folklore. Though native to parts of the northern hemisphere, its appearance in old stories often marked the boundary between real and not real. In some cultures, it was used in ritual. In others, avoided like debt collectors. Either way, finding one indoors was not a compliment. You light a small lamp, not because it's dark, but because it isn't. Outside, the ring is still there, still full, still waiting. You wonder what it's waiting for, or whom. Obscure belief from the edges of Norway. It was once said that if you dreamed of a fairy ring 3 nights in a row, you had no choice but to enter it. Dreaming of it once meant you'd been noticed. Twice, invited. 3 times, expected. The only way to stop the dreams was to bury a comb under the ring and never speak of it again. No one remembers why it had to be a comb, but everyone agreed it worked, or they stopped talking about it. You haven't dreamed yet, that you remember. You consider writing a letter. To whom, you're not sure. A neighbor, a cousin, yourself. It feels like the sort of moment one should document before it vanishes like a dropped name in a crowded room. You glance again at the cupboard. Still closed. Still slightly too quiet. The fox is back. It's sitting on your doorstep now, tail curled, ears alert. Watching. You stand at the window. It meets your gaze. And then it does something unexpected. It nods. Just once, deliberate. Then turns and walks toward the ring. You don't follow. But you will. Not tonight, but soon. When the wind shifts again. When the light goes sideways. When you start to dream. It begins with a dream. Of course it does. You're standing in the forest clearing again. The fairy ring fully lit. Not glowing softly like before, but alive. Vibrant. The mushrooms hum. You don't hear it so much as feel it in your teeth. The ground beneath your feet is warm, pulsing even, like the earth has a heartbeat, and it's just now letting you hear it. There's no sky in this dream, just treetops and a circle of light, and the smell of mint crushed underfoot. You see the fox, only it's not a fox. It's taller now, standing, wearing the shape of a fox like a well-fitted cloak. The ears remain, the eyes too, but there are hands, long-fingered, careful hands, the kind that would sew with silver thread or slice through fog with a gesture. It nods again, then gestures to the ring. You don't move. You wake up. Your blanket is halfway across the room. The fire is out. There's a second mushroom on the windowsill now. It wasn't there last night. This one is black, velvety, with a faint shimmer like it was dusted in hash or secrets. It smells like petrichor and old iron. You do not touch it. You get dressed slowly. The usual cloak, the second best boots, and your bread dough still in your pocket, slightly flattened, a little more symbolic each day. You take a sip of water. It tastes faintly of time, though you don't remember putting any in the jug. The cottage creaks like it's trying not to be noticed. Outside, the ring is exactly where you left it, except one of the mushrooms has moved. Just a little. Just enough. You feel like a chess piece on someone else's board. The path around the ring feels changed. The earth is looser. You swear the air carries music now. Something distant, plucked strings maybe. It might also just be your pulse. Major historical fact for your morning journal. Across Europe, fairy rings were often believed to be thin places, spots where the veil between the mortal world and the supernatural was weaker. Druids, monks, and even early Christian missionaries occasionally referenced these sites as places where miracles or disappearances were more likely. In some monastic texts, they were simply called God's blind spots. Imagine being so feared you get mentioned in the same breath as divine administrative errors. Obscure cultural tidbit. In rural parts of Brittany, it was said that to speak aloud in a fairy ring would cause your words to echo in the ears of the 5 or 7 years. Everything you said, every idle comment, would be remembered and repeated when you least expected it. This led to some very quiet mushroom foraging trips and a robust culture of interpretive shrugging. Historians still debate whether thin places were viewed with reverence or suspicion. In some traditions, they were sites of pilgrimage. In others, places to be marked, circled, and avoided entirely. The folklore rarely agrees, which, honestly, feels like part of the charm. You decide not to speak near the ring. Instead, you walk the edge again, counterclockwise, the way your grandmother taught you when you were too young to question the logic. You notice something odd. Your footprints from yesterday are gone. The ground is damp, soft, but there's no sign you've ever walked here. That's fine. Totally fine. The fox returns mid-morning. It stands just across the ring, tail flicking slowly, like a pendulum with opinions. It doesn't nod this time. It simply waits. And so do you. You spend the afternoon weaving dried herbs into bundles, rosemary, sage, yarrow. Not because you're superstitious, just because you've got the time. You place them above the doors, around the window, one beside the hearth. You don't say a word while you do it, not even when your neighbor, Marta, passes by and mutters, "Storm's coming." You want to ask her what kind, but you don't, because the ring hums louder when you ask too many questions. And the third mushroom on your table is starting to lean ever so slightly in your direction. Nightfall doesn't come gradually. It drops like a curtain. One moment it's late afternoon, the sky still holding its warm gray. The next, it's dark, too dark, like someone skipped a step. No sunset, no twilight, just the sudden knowledge that if you go outside now, something might be waiting, and it doesn't want to be named. A cottage feels smaller in this light. like the walls have leaned in slightly. You light every candle you own. The one by the hearth stutters. You relight it. It goes out again. You leave it alone. There's a sound outside. Not footsteps, not wind. Something between a sigh and a bell. You sit very still. And then, the knock. Just one, soft, not on the door, on the window. You freeze. A long moment passes. Then another knock. This one on the other window. You don't move. You don't breathe. Major historical fact. In 17th century England, certain folk customs warned against answering nighttime knocks, especially near known fairy sites. It was believed that to respond to these knocks was to accept an invitation, and to refuse was only sometimes allowed. Some communities taught children to place a bowl of milk at the threshold in lieu of an answer. Others said to turn over your shoes and hide under the bed. You slowly reach for your boots, flip them upside down. The knocking stops. But now the house smells like violets. Faint, sweet, wrong. You go to the window after what feels like an hour. Nothing there, but on the sill, a third mushroom. Tall, blue-gray, thin-stemmed. You're not sure it's even a real species. It leans slightly forward like it's listening. You close the shutters. Tightly. Obscure custom from northern Wales. If a mushroom appeared indoors overnight, it was considered a warning. A message from the world beneath. You were advised to offer something in return: sugar, salt, a song, but never your name. You hum an old tune, one your grandmother used to sing while she braided your hair. It has no words. You don't remember where it came from. Your voice is unsteady at first, then steadier. The tune winds through the air like steam from a kettle. The mushrooms seem to listen, or at least they don't protest. The fire finally catches. The goat, you still don't own one, bleats once outside. You don't check. You lie in bed, boots beside you, bread dough still in your pocket. You sleep, eventually. And you dream again. This time, you're not alone in the ring. There are others. You can't quite see their faces, but they are dancing. And one of them has your shadow. The morning brings no light. Technically, the sun has risen somewhere, but your cottage remains steeped in a dimness that feels borrowed. Like daylight has been rationed, and you're on the village list of habitual overusers. You open the shutters. Outside, everything looks normal. Almost too normal. The trees stand in their usual places. The sky is its usual gray. But the ring? The ring is perfect. Too perfect. The grass inside is now impossibly green. More emerald than anything nature ought to produce. The mushrooms gleam slightly, as if dew has been replaced with polish. You count them 12. You counted 10 yesterday. You're almost sure. Unless you didn't. Or unless it's not a number you were meant to keep track of in the first place. On the windowsill, the third mushroom is gone. In its place, a single silver coin, worn smooth, cold, resting quietly where the blue-gray stalk once stood. You don't touch it, but you can feel its weight from across the room. You sit at your table. The fire is out again. You don't bother relighting it. The bread dough in your pocket has hardened to something resembling a worry stone. You roll it between your fingers. You wonder who placed the coin. You wonder if it's a thank you or an invoice. Major historical fact of the day. Silver coins were often used in rituals across many European cultures, not just as currency, but as offerings. In Scottish folklore, silver left at the threshold was believed to ward off fairies, or, paradoxically, invite their protection. It all depended on how it was given, and more importantly, whether the coin was taken before dawn. You didn't notice when it arrived. And now it's well past sunrise. The coin hasn't moved, yet you open the cupboard slowly. The mushroom inside, wrapped carefully in cloth, is gone. The cloth remains. neatly folded, and beneath it, another coin. Same size, same texture, same not quite right shine. Obscure cultural tidbit. In certain parts of Eastern Europe, it was believed that silver left behind by spirits wasn't really silver. It was glamoured leaf, or cold ash, or sometimes snakeskin. Touching it with bare skin would bind the deal. Exactly what deal you had agreed to was never specified, but that hardly seemed like the biggest problem. Historians still debate whether these traditions stemmed from older Indo-European myths, or simply from a healthy distrust of currency that showed up unaccompanied. You wrap the coins in the breadcloth and place them gently on the table. You sit. You listen. The cottage is silent, except for the wind threading through the chimney, sounding exactly like someone whispering your name in reverse. You leave the cottage just before dusk, not because you planned to, but because something in your chest begins to ache if you sit still too long. Not pain, exactly, just a pull. Like when you forget something important and your body remembers before your brain does. You bring no tools, just your cloak. Your bread dough, flattened now into a talisman or a superstition, depending on who's asking. And the coins. The ring is waiting. The fox is not in sight, which somehow makes you more nervous. You don't trust this version of the woods when it's trying to be subtle. You circle the ring, once, twice, 3 times, the old way. No change, no flash, no music, but the light around you shifts slightly, the way it does when clouds pass over the sun, except it's twilight, and the sky is cloudless. You place the coins at the edge of the ring. You don't speak. You've learned better. The grass seems to draw them in, just a little, as if the earth itself exhales and tucks them into its sleeve. And then, music. Not loud, not cheerful, just the slow, strange melody of something being played too far away to hear properly. A stringed instrument. No rhythm. No key. Just a sound that curves, like smoke, into the back of your skull. You blink, and the mushrooms are taller. The ring is closer. You didn't move, did you? Major historical fact to hold in your cautious hands. In the 18th century, German scholars recorded multiple accounts of villagers lost to the circle. These were people said to have danced at the edge of fairy rings, sometimes as part of festivals, sometimes by accident, and become altered. The phrase used was Zeitverloren, time lost. One woman claimed she only danced for an hour. Her children were grandparents by the time she returned. Obscure folk belief from the Austrian Alps. If you entered a fairy ring with a blade of grass between your teeth, you could see the world as the fae did, but only until you swallowed it. After that, you would never again be able to distinguish music from language, or lies from stories. You crouch beside the ring, not stepping in, not yet, but you feel something pass behind you. No footfall, no breath, just pressure, a presence. You turn quickly, no one, except the fox, back again. It sits a little farther from the ring this time, and for the first time, it looks worried. You and the fox sit in uneasy company. You on your heels, cloak heavy with dusk. It perched at the forest's edge, tail wrapped neatly around its paws, like punctuation. It doesn't move, doesn't blink. It simply watches, the way a person might watch a bridge creak under too much weight. The mushrooms don't glow tonight. They don't need to. The grass inside the ring sways in perfect stillness. No wind, just motion, as though the circle has begun to breathe on its own. You think about stepping in. Not a big step, just one toe. A gesture. And that's when the fox growls. Low warning. Almost disappointed. You freeze. Major historical fact to steady yourself. In early Irish folklore, some fairy rings were believed to be traps, not entrances, not doorways, but lures. Patterns built to catch the curious, to make someone lean too far, to blink at the wrong moment, to wonder what would happen if. And the answer was never, ever, nothing. You lean back onto your heels. The music has changed. It's quieter now, slower, like someone's playing an instrument they don't quite understand. But the instrument is alive and learning them in return. You wonder if the sound is inside your ears or the ground. The ring shifts again, a tiny ripple, like water struck by a falling leaf. You look at the coins, gone, but in their place, something else. A braid of golden thread, very fine, almost hair, and tied at the center, like a knot that means something old. Obscure detail from Carpathian lore. If you found a braid at your doorstep, it meant someone had dreamed your name, usually a witch, or someone who wished to become one. You are not to burn it, nor wear it, but to place it under your pillow for 7 nights, and then wait. Historians still debate the purpose of these tokens. Offerings? Threats? Binding spells with a softer voice? You don't pocket the braid, but you don't leave it behind either. You walk back to the cottage slowly. The fox doesn't follow. At your door, you pause. Everything looks the same, but you know it isn't. The hearth fire is out again. The candles have burned down to puddles of wax, and the scent of violets has returned. But this time, it's sweeter, fresher, like something very close by has exhaled. You step outside. The air smells like fog before it happens, cool, damp, with that oddly metallic hush. There's no wind, no birdsong. Even the usual creak of your cottage roof behind you has gone still, as if the building itself is holding its breath. The ring is no longer a ring. It's a spiral. The mushrooms have rearranged themselves overnight. Or perhaps the earth did. Or perhaps you finally see them correctly. They curve now, curling inward in a slow, deliberate coil. Not jagged, not rushed, just waiting. The grass inside is even greener, if that's possible. Glossy like glass, motionless despite the suggestion of breeze. You crouch at the edge. Your hands rest on your knees. And you notice something. Your shadow. It doesn't quite match. The morning light is soft and golden, but your shadow is too long, too narrow. It moves half a second late, like a tired actor in a forgotten play. It isn't alarming. Not yet, but you look away from it anyway. The fox is gone. The music is gone. But in its place is silence that knows things. Deep silence. The kind that seems to lean toward you, pressing gently against your ears until you notice the beat of your own heart. The kind that's so complete it becomes a sound in itself. You speak aloud, not loudly, not clearly, just a name. Not yours. A different one. One you don't remember learning. One that leaves a strange taste in your mouth. Iron, honey, and something like peppermint. The spiral shudders. Just once. Then stillness. A breath, inhaled but not yet exhaled. Major historical fact to sit with. Spiral formations in nature, particularly those formed by mushrooms, have long been considered sacred or significant. Ancient stone carvings across Celtic and Nordic lands repeat this pattern, often near burial mounds or old forest sites. Scholars theorize they represented journeys, not just through space, but through memory, time, or other unseen thresholds. Obscure cultural belief from the Baltic coast. To walk a spiral inward was to ask a question. To walk it outward was to accept the answer. Walking both ways without intent could confuse the spirits, or worse, yourself. Historians still debate whether spiral patterns in fairy rings were literal invitations or just natural growth misunderstood. But no one who studied them up close ever did so casually, or more than once. You do not walk it, not yet, but your feet itch with the memory of dancing. You leave the spiral and return to your doorstep, where something new awaits, the old tin pail from your well. Except now, it's filled with water, and floating atop it, a single clover blossom, and a coil of golden thread. You did not put it there. The water smells faintly of mead. The thread smells faintly of sleep. You pick up the pail. It's heavier than it should be. Back inside, the fire has reignited itself. The cupboard is open. The blooming mushroom has vanished. And your bread dough? Gone. In its place, a folded slip of birch bark, pressed flat, wrapped with fine thread. You open it. Inside, there is no writing, but you understand it anyway, not in words, just in certainty. The next time you step into the spiral, there will be no return to your cottage. You sit down. The tea is still warm. The coins are still gone. Your boots feel heavy in the corner. And outside, the spiral waits, not like a trap, not like a threat, like an answer, patient and green. The next morning, your boots feel heavier than usual. You don't know if they're damp or simply reluctant. Like they too are aware of what's waiting in the clearing beyond the trees. You lace them slowly, methodically, not out of hesitation. No, that left you days ago, but because you are measuring time. Like someone who knows there's only so much left before the pattern completes itself. You pack a few things, not many. A piece of bread, a ribbon your mother once tied around your wrist to keep you from wandering too far, a flint, a pouch of salt, and the birch bark folded back into itself and tied with the golden thread. You don't know why. It simply feels right to bring it, or maybe wrong not to. You leave the cottage. You don't lock the door, not because you expect to return, but because if anyone comes looking, you want them to know you didn't leave in fear. You left because the spiral was always going to ask again. Outside, the world is still unnaturally quiet. The trees feel farther apart today, the air stretched thin between them, as if even the woods have agreed to give you space. When you reach the clearing, the spiral is unchanged, still perfect, still waiting. The grass inside is so bright, it hurts your eyes. You blink once, then again. A soft breeze lifts your cloak like an unseen hand brushing past. The scent of the spiral is subtle, now lavender, and something older. Stone, maybe. Ash, milk left too long in a pewter cup. Major historical fact. In many parts of medieval Europe, it was customary to leave offerings at the center of fairy rings. Dried flowers, bread, silver, even whispers. Some believed the right offering would grant a vision. Others warned that even acknowledgement was a form of consent. Obscure belief from Brittany. If you stepped into a spiral while carrying salt and bread, you would not be taken immediately. The Fae would grant you the listening, 3 days of silent observation in their world, after which you could choose to stay or forget. If you chose to stay, your name would change. If you chose to forget, the spiral would never open to you again. Historians still debate what the listening meant. Some argue it was metaphorical, a form of meditation or trance. Others insist it referred to something more literal, an invitation to overhear the workings of the other world. Of course, no one ever writes down what they heard. You walk the spiral, not boldly, not slowly, just steadily. Each step feels like it's been taken before, maybe by you, maybe by someone you've dreamt as. The world outside the spiral grows dimmer, not darker, just less real. The sky turns the color of old linen. The trees fade, sound narrows. You reach the center and stop. There's no door, no beam of light, just stillness. And then a soft rustle behind you. You turn. The fox. But again, not a fox. Taller now, wearing a cloak not unlike your own. Hands visible, eyes gleaming. It tilts its head, as if asking a question you already know the answer to. You nod. You don't know what you're agreeing to. Not completely, but your bones are tired of resisting. And your shadow has already stepped away. The fox nods back, then lifts the hand. and touches your forehead, you do not fall. You do not vanish. You simply change, like smoke deciding to become cloud. You wake somewhere else. You think it's still the clearing, but the spiral is gone. So are the trees. The sky above is not sky. It's more like silk stretched overhead, glimmering faintly, shifting between silver and soft moss. There's no sun, no moon, yet everything glows, gentle, dreamlike. You are not alone. Shapes move at the edge of vision, some tall, some wide, some drifting as if underwater. None of them come close. Not yet. But they see you. That much is clear. You are seen. And in this place, that is a kind of permission. You sit up. Your cloak is different now. Heavier, embroidered with thread you don't remember stitching. It smells faintly of thyme and earth. In your palm rests the birch bark, unchanged. Except it is worn, and now bears a spiral etched faintly into the surface. You press your thumb to it. The etching glows briefly, then fades. You hear a sound like bells melting, then silence. Major historical fact. Accounts of the otherworld in ancient Celtic texts often include the theme of altered perception, time moving differently, senses heightening or dulling, speech becoming song. Warriors who returned from such realms often found that centuries had passed. Others never returned, not because they were forbidden, but because they no longer wanted to. Obscure detail from an old Welsh tale. A girl who followed a fox into a spiral was given 3 days of silent passage. On the 4th, she returned, wearing a ring made of woven moonlight. Her hair turned silver, though she hadn't aged. When asked what she'd seen, she answered only, "The world beneath listens louder than the one above speaks." Historians still debate if this tale was metaphor for mental illness, divine communion, or extremely specific fashion advice. You rise. No footsteps mark your movement here. The ground is soft, like moss over glass. You walk toward what appears to be a doorway, though it's simply an arch formed by hanging vines that shimmer like rain. As you pass beneath it, the air grows warmer. You feel remembered. And then you see them, the dancers. A dozen figures moving in slow, looping rhythm. Some wear animal faces, some wear none. Some glide, some hover. All of them watch you without turning, as though their awareness is a shared thing, like breath. And at the center of the dance, a circle, faintly marked, not grass, not earth, just space, a place where something was, or will be, and you understand, without needing words. This is your choice now, to step in and become part of the spiral, or to listen, 3 days, 3 nights, and then decide. You do not step into the center, not yet. You sit cross-legged at the edge of the dance, your cloak pooling around you like spilled ink. The earth beneath you is warm, not in the way that says sun, but in the way that says heartbeat. You place your palms flat against it and feel it, a rhythm soft and ancient, pulsing far below, like the ground is humming to itself in a language older than breath. The figures continue to move, looping, drifting, never hurrying, never stopping. They pass in and out of each other's wake, like birds on the same air current. Some wear shapes you almost recognize, limbs and eyes, fingers and shoulders. Others are made of less obvious things, wind, glass, fog, the memory of laughter. One drips softly as it passes, like a candle, forgetting it's not supposed to melt. You try to count them again. 13. Definitely 13. Then one passes behind a wide stone and becomes 2. Then another folds inward, and you're back at 10. You give up. The air here tastes like honey diluted in snowmelt. It shouldn't be comforting, but it is. Somewhere above, or maybe below, a thin music glides along, not notes, just the suggestion of them. A half-remembered tune you used to hum while threading berries onto twine. You are not afraid. You should be. But something about this place refuses fear. It replaces it with something quieter. A hush, a patience, a promise. Major historical fact. Across the Celtic world, stories of the silent passage abound. Tales of those who return from the other world, not with riches or curses, but with changed silence. They could no longer sing or whisper or lie. They had been shown something too large for words, and so speech was simply let go. In many communities, such people were taken in, fed, and listened to, though they never spoke again. You press your fingers into the soil. It presses back. Obscure lore from northern Albania. When someone sat at the edge of a fairy circle without stepping inside, they were considered a bridge, a watcher, a vessel between breath and dream. These people were said to see flashes of the future in puddles, to smell emotions, to feel time like weather. Historians still debate if these stories were reverent or suspicious. Many such people became wise healers. Others were quietly sent to live near rivers and spoken of only in proverbs. You lean forward, not into the ring, just closer. The dancers continue their rhythm. But one tall, veiled, hands dusted in ash, pauses beside you. They do not speak. They only kneel. You watch them draw a spiral in the dirt between you. Not perfectly round, a little wobbly, a little real. They place something in the center, a small, unremarkable stone. You look up, and they're gone. But the spiral remains. And in your lap, a bundle of moss. Warm, fragrant, wrapped in silk thread. Inside is your bread dough, perfectly leavened, soft and ready. You don't know what it means, but you tuck it away carefully, reverently. As the music continues, you settle back onto your elbows and gaze up at the night sky, a shifting canopy of color and light and shadow and nothing. And you wonder if it's night here, or if time has simply paused so that you could listen. You don't dream when you fall asleep. Not this time. Instead, you rest in the spiral's breath, like a question with no need for an answer. The second day feels longer, not because it drags, but because time stretches differently here. Moments unfold in layers. A glance might last an hour. A blink might echo into dusk. You sleep once or twice, it's hard to tell, and dream of rivers that run backward in trees whose roots sing lullabies in forgotten languages. You wake with something pressed into your hand. It's not the braid, it's not the coin. It's a single hair, white, fine, impossibly long, coiled into a spiral and tied with red thread. You don't know who gave it to you, but you know it's for you. You tuck it inside your cloak. The figures continue their dance. They never tire. They never break step. You begin to recognize them, not as people, but as presences. One smells of salt and old maps. One hums when nearby. One always turns their head just before you look. You think the fox is here. Maybe always was. You just can't pick it out now. They're all wearing masks made of dream, logic, and half-truths. You are still silent, not because you must be, but because speaking here would be like shouting in a library made of clouds. Rude and probably ineffective. Major historical fact. In parts of the Orkney Islands, tales persist of the spiral sleep, a trance-like state induced by fairy magic or deep meditation. Locals claim to enter it near certain stone circles. They described days of silence, visions of unrecognizable symbols, and the faint sound of people dancing just out of view. Obscure lore from northern Italy. A person who had been called to the spiral place might return bearing new knowledge, but they were forbidden from using it for 7 years. Not because it was dangerous, but because it was too soon. To act too quickly was to risk forgetting who you had been. Historians still debate whether this represents a cultural rite of passage or simply poetic caution against ego. Either way, 7 years of patience is a lost art. You rise on the second evening, find that your feet remember the spiral's path better than your mind. You begin to walk it backward. Not all the way out, just enough. The dancers notice. Their rhythm shifts, gently, like a river changing current. And you hear a whisper, not a voice, just breath. It says, soon. You dream one final time. It's not like the others. This one is quieter, dimmer, like memories sinking into the soil. You're standing in your cottage, though it's not quite your cottage. Everything is softer, blurred. Your boots sit by the hearth. Your table holds the folded cloth. There is a braid on the windowsill. A voice, your own, says, "Do you still want to go?" You don't answer. You wake. The spiral is gone. You are standing in a field. The sun is rising. A real sun, this time golden. Honest, birdsong, a chill breeze, the smell of wet grass and firewood. You hold nothing. Not the braid, not the coin, not even the bread dough. But you remember everything. You turn. Your cottage is behind you, exactly as you left it, the door slightly ajar. A trail of small mushrooms leading up the path. And on your table, seen through the window, sits a loaf of bread, golden crusted, still warm. Major historical fact. Throughout folklore, the return from the other world is rarely flashy. It's marked by small changes, unaged mirrors, whispers in the well, a single flower growing where nothing bloomed before. The transformation is quiet, lasting, and never spoken of directly. Obscure belief from Transylvania. When a person returns changed, their shadow is sometimes a day behind. It catches up eventually, but until it does, they are to avoid mirrors and never walk the same road twice. You step inside, sit at your table. The fire crackles to life on its own. You pour yourself tea and begin your day. Not quite who you were, but not quite anyone else. And now, let it all settle. The spiral, the silence, the slow dancing rhythms of something ancient brushing against the edge of your world. Let the edges of the story soften like wet parchment left to dry in the sun. There's no rush to hold onto it. The memory lingers without your help. Breathe in. You're back in your own world now, where grass is just grass, rings are just plants. And if a mushroom appears on your windowsill, it's probably just been windy. Probably. The warmth of the fire hungs beneath your ribs, and the weight of the blanket or the room, or simply your own calm, wraps itself around your shoulders like a long-forgotten friend. You are safe. You are whole. And the spiral has receded for now. Let the final embers of the story curl like smoke into your chest, soft and unbothered, the way night slips into dawn. You don't need to remember all of it. Just the feeling that something once noticed you and chose to be kind. Let your thoughts slow. Let your body be still. You're allowed to drift. Like fog rolling off a hill at first light. Like moss growing in the forgotten cracks of old stone. Like a story paused in the middle, just where it should be. Good night.